I want to talk about racism, fascism, and Trumpism and Wicked, and how it's the opposite of the anti-fascism in Oz. And you could say this is accidental because the person who wrote the Wicked story obviously never read the Oz books or doesn't respect the Oz books, and that's where the problem arises. If you try to twist something or corrupt something without trying to make it right, then you're possibly just trying to destroy the good thing. It's very similar to the Democrats, how they will claim to oppose fascism, a claim to oppose Trumpism, and then they don't do it at the crucial moment, or they build up the power and attention from saying they'll do that and not do it. Wicked does that in some ways. Elphaba herself does that in some ways in the Wicked story. It's uh, fitting in itself. It's got the holographic reality in itself that it's what it is through and through. It's just not Oz. It's the opposite of Oz. And again, if you take something extremely mystically anti-fascist like Oz is, and you try to twist it up, it's no surprise you're going to get fascism. Also, look at the origins of the book author, the Wicked book author's inspiration to write Wicked, and you can see where the fascism came in. Of course, L. Frank Baum, who wrote the Oz books, was inspired by the rise of fascism in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and wrote the solution for it. There's no money and no war in Oz. But Wicked puts forth all these ideas that are racist and Trumpy, even accidentally, but they end up really corrupting Oz or slandering Oz. Even worse than that, they end up repackaging Oz. It's the exact same relationship between Oz and Wicked that America and MAGA have. America and the American dream, American ideals are good. MAGA is evil. It's the nightmare, dark side version of that. It's the same as Jesus being good and Christianity being evil. There's a dark side of things that are good that men have made in order to prevent people from getting to the good. Well, they've made wicked in order to prevent people from getting to Oz. Now, some specifics about the racism and fascism in Wicked. There's this racism against Elphaba because she's green, although Oz seems to not have racism against other people. It's just our version of racism in America is transposed, or an analogy for our racism in America is the way they treat Elphaba for being green in Oz. But there's not racism against other people in Oz, which is similar to the real Oz, which doesn't have racism. Although there is the animal racism, the racism against the animal race, and then that extends to the Munchkins in the Wicked stories. There becomes racism against the Munchkins, or the same types of prohibitions against the Munchkins for having any support of the animals. Very much like when Trump is kidnapping Mexican people or Hispanic people now, he'll be kidnapping other groups of people later if we don't stop him kidnapping the Hispanic people now. That's fascism. Now, this is criticized in Wicked. I mean, Elphaba is standing up against this in Wicked. But, like I said, she's like the Democrats. She gets the power and attention from standing up to it, but then she doesn't actually do it. In the end, spoiler alert, Wicked's trash anyway, so I don't really mind spoiling this story. She ends up passing all of her power and influence from having opposed Oz to Glinda. She ends up erasing herself. So one problem with white supremacy is erasing the minority people who do things and then giving their credit to the white people. That's what they do in this movie, except Elphaba does it to herself. She gladly takes on that role to raise Glinda's ascendancy, but doesn't have Glinda contradict any of the evil Trumpy stuff that she was part of to get in power. It's like if somebody made Caroline Levitt president and was just like, well, Caroline Levitt, can still be the way she was. There's an interesting parallel there, too. I'm glad I mentioned Caroline Levitt. When Madame Morrible gives Glinda the wand, she says it really helps sell it. It reminds me of the cross that Caroline Levitt wears. It really helps sell it, but it's not real. She's not from Jesus. She's from Christianity. She's from the evil Antichrist thing that produced Hitler and Putin and Trump. And Jesus isn't responsible for that. Christianity is to blame, but Jesus, no. So Wicked is addressing some of these issues, and like I said, like the Democrats, it gets the popularity and the power from Oz, for one thing, just steals the popularity of Oz. But then it gets the power of getting all this attention, but for bad ideas. I mentioned Madame Morrible. She doesn't exist in Oz. In Wicked, she's just a created character in order to transpose the wickedness, the evil of the Wicked Witch to a different character. This is the real evil character. This is the real irredeemable character. Now, in the casting of Wicked, they made her Chinese and have a really thick Chinese accent. To me, this is extremely racist because America has always been super racist to get Chinese people for as long as I've been alive anyway. I've noticed that just ebbing and flowing, but kind of always on the increase. And here's just an example of it. Make the bad person the Chinese person in order to make, well, the Chinese are the real bad people, not Putin, not Trump, the con man. Now, Trump is a con man and the Wizard of Oz is a con man. In the Oz books, the Wizard of Oz is a redeemed character who's not that bad. In Wicked, he has to be bad, but he can't even be the full source of the bad. He's forgiven, basically, or let go, or something like that. In much the same way they would want Trump to be let go. It's very protective of the fascism while claiming in a slight way to criticize the fascism. Again, like the Democrats. So we need to see through the evils of Wicked. The way it kind of addresses racism, but basically just empowers racism, whitewashes or pinkwashes or greenwashes the racism to allow everything that Elphaba does just switch over to Glinda. That's extremely racist. That concept is extremely racist. And people who think that, you know, the ways that it satisfies your desire to oppose racism, such as cheering for the animals and cheering for Elphaba herself, it's really suckering you into another level of racism. And, you know, we should talk about that. The good thing about Wicked is if we talk about it, if it brings people to Oz, if we get to the discussion of what Oz is really about, which is the opposite of Wicked, then we will end up ending Trumpism and fascism. We will end up ending all this evil that Wicked is. It reminds me a lot of not just the Democrats in Congress, but a lot of people who make content, Adam Mockler and people like this, who get a lot of popularity and a lot of platform, which would make you suspicious to begin with. Why does Net and YouTube and other channels, other platforms allow them to have this much platform and audience when they suppress people who have actual leftist views? It's because Adam Mockler, for instance, denies the Putin connection. He'll address every other topic going on with Trump, but when it comes to Trump is Putin's puppet, he wants to deny that. And he said himself, half my audience thinks Trump is Putin's puppet, and I and the other half think not. Well, the other half wouldn't be half if you, the host, weren't the one protecting Putin in this situation. I think they know they're doing it. I think they're probably paid to do it. It seems really, really obvious to me. But again, I've had the insight of Oz. I've had the insight of being able to see through these things from a transcendent reality where there is no money and no war. And when you see that the future has no money and no war, kind of like what people say about the, I forget what they call it, the singularity thing where the higher intelligence will be upset with people who block the higher intelligence. Well, I'm upset with people who are blocking the higher intelligence of Oz. And I'm upset with people spending all this money on AI when they won't even listen to people who are just humans but smarter than them, or whatever spirits they are, fairy people who are smarter than them, who tell them, stop being so fascist, stop being so greedy. They won't even listen to that. What's the AI going to tell them? You know, is the AI going to have to trick them into stop being so fascist, so greedy by, I don't know, absorbing all their money in data centers? But allowing their money to crash, is that one of the ways that AI is going to be smarter than them, to replace money? Because that's the smart thing to do. End money, end war. Oz does that. The Oz books do that, which is why they want to replace them with these inferior things to distract you from Oz. Wicked doesn't. Wicked is really just this guy's a 1980s high school coming of age fantasy put in an Oz package. And as enjoyable as, you know, the songs, the performances, the artistry behind the acting and the facial expressions, there's only one set of facial expressions in Wicked for Good that will haunt your nightmares for the rest of your life. But as good as everything else in the movie is, besides the story, it can be enjoyable and stuff. There can be good things about it, but we need to talk about these issues. Again, people are talking about Aria, Cynthiana, the Ariana Cynthia Erivo pairing that they don't seem to justify with a cute name like I just did. But anyway, they're talking about that and talking about their body size, their body shape, And they're acting like they're opposing fascism by saying, well, fascism promotes skinniness, and these people are being skinny, so they're being fascist. No, they're being fascist for supporting wicked, for supporting the wicked message, the underlying fascism of the wicked message. And opposing skinniness is not opposing fascism. We can be making the same amount of content instead of talking about their body size or their relationship. We can make that content about Trumpism, about the scam artists of the Wizard of Oz in Wicked and Trump. We could be talking about Trump's kidnapping and concentration camps and the similarity with the animals and the oppression in Wicked. We're not talking about these issues because Wicked didn't lean into those issues enough to be anti-Trump. They're probably afraid of how powerful their movie, even the story that they had, could be against Trump, and they didn't want to lean into that. But the story, as it's written, is by somebody who did not understand Oz. You can tell that just from the language they use, the weird word combinations. That stuff's not in Oz. That stuff's from Dr. Seuss. So this person just knew that there were Oz books, didn't read them, and just throws all this stuff in there that is anti-Oz, or that really doesn't do justice to Oz. So follow the yellow brick road, go over the rainbow, through the whirlpool, to Oz, the real Oz. Take the road that goes to Oz, and check out the Oz books. They're available in your library, or you can buy them. But you'll see what I'm talking about when you read them. They're extremely anti-fascist, and it's because they're so anti-fascist that they've been trying for a century to replace them with something fascist. And they did it with Wicked, but we don't have to accept it. We can talk about it and make this fascism in Wicked backfire on them, and end Trumpism with the true Oz ideals that Wicked covers up and distracts from and obstructs, but we could get to with enough discussion. So thanks for listening. Thanks for talking with me, and see you in Oz.